Welcome back to Naked History Debrief, our post-credits lab where we're going to look at new lenses, no reruns on everything in the main episode. Tonight, we're going to be clocking message per minute realities, trace how code list actually changed in the field, and show you the improv rules talkers used when the list ran out. And we're going to play with the phonetic layer you didn't even hear on the main feed. Then we'll sprint through this week in history from the 24th of November to the 30th. First, the Macy's parade, a couple of crisp space snacks, and the era of two Thanksgiving. And we'll be closing with a compact comparison. Human code versus machine crypto without the math headache. Then we'll give you a little bit of a tease as to our next main episode. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Now, first up on our Naked Regrets segment is the numbers. So let's put a number on fast. In live fire drills preserved in unit logs, the trained Navajo or Dene pair could push a 3-element fire mission, target grid, munition, and timing in about 20 to 40 seconds, including readback. Now, that's not a best-case anecdote. It's a repeatable band that assumes static, breath control, and at least one confirm. Conventional cipher workflows, even when smooth, added in cipher plus log plus transmit plus decipher. It would result easily in 2 to 5 minutes, and it was vulnerable to a backlog of transmission. Now, the delta for this isn't academic. At 30 seconds, artillery adjusts while the enemy is still moving. At 4 minutes, the battlefield's a completely different photograph. Now, how these lists evolved is a story of quiet logistics. Originally, the word lists and alphabet sets were seeds, not scripture, something to follow but not abide strictly by. Now, units maintained change sheets, or small amenda that swapped synonyms, added terms such as new vehicle nicknames or odd terrain, or retired a mapping suspected of compromise. Now, these change sheets were localized. Your regiment might say the equivalent of dragon for flamethrower this month, while another used fire hose. That local autonomy denied the enemy a single master key and let leaders tune lists to accent and cadence of specific speakers. Now, what about error handling when the air was soup? Talkers leaned on micro protocols that didn't need a manual. One common trick was isolate and confirm. Repeat only the fragile fragment, just the grid or just the timing, rather than rereading the whole order. Another was the double anchor, sending a critical element 2 ways, both by alphabet stream and word list tag, so a garble in one channel was caught in the other. These habits cost just one breath of airtime and saved platoons from walking into their own smoke. Now, this improv still had rules. If a thing wasn't on the list, you could comprise it from nearby ideas, but the pair had to stick with that composition for the duration of the operation. Midstream synonym swaps were a sin. Consistency beat cleverness. New coinages got penciled onto scratch pads and, if they worked, graduated onto the next change sheet. That's the part that most people miss. The code's creativity was disciplined, almost editorial. Now for the phonetic analogs, you know the modern Alpha, Bravo, Charlie. The NATO military phonetic alphabet is something we've all heard in movies or in some real life. Now the code talker nets use their own phonetic alphabets. They were short, high-contrast words native to the speakers to spell labels and grids inside noise. The win in this wasn't just clarity, it was cognitive load. When a speaker says a word that already lives in his mouth, he spends 0 brain cycles searching for it. That frees attention for the next element: timing, munitions, or a sudden negative from a squad that just moved. Now, a good phonetic set avoids collision pairs. These are the first sounds that smear under static. Think Bravo and Papa, or Mike and November. B and P and M and N sound very similar to each other, even over a podcast. Now imagine them over a combat radio. Now it also prefers one-beat words to keep syllable counts tight. And here's a tiny delight. Many operators paced their breath to 4-count phrases. 2 beats for the alphabet fragment, 2 for the tag. So the receiving ear could predict cadence even when content changed. Rhythm worked as error control. Now the phonetics also created hybrid messages. That's something that we didn't cover in the main episode. They are basically action via word list, but with coordinates via alphabet to dodge number muddle. Now an example, all in English stand-ins, we're going to be saying, send leader units with iron tube to high ground, grid bear, hawk, quail, bravo. Time, first light. 3 categories, 1 breath. No statistical handles for a cryptoanalyst to grab onto. Now, training for the code talkers used call and response drills with deliberate mishear traps. Instructors would inject a near collision such as bear or deer, and then force the sender to correct using the isolate and confirm rule rather than repeating the entire traffic. That muscle memory, the ability to fix a single letter without flooding the net, was as prized as speed. First up for our This Week in History segment, we have on November 24th, 1969, Apollo 12 splashes down. The precision landing near Surveyor 3 proved that lunar pinpointing wasn't a fluke. It rewired mission planning from reach to rendezvous with intent. On November 27th of 1924, the first Macy's parade happens. Now we know it as the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade, but originally it was the Macy's Christmas Parade. This was staffed heavily by immigrant employees eager to blend old-world street festivals with American retail theater. It even had live Bronx Zoo animals marching before the balloons would eventually take over in 1927. It was an early reminder that American holidays are engineered rituals that learn as they go. Next up, we have November 28th, 1964, a date during the time of the Great Space Race. Shows Mariner 4's data processing milestone. Now those stark Mars frames, the crater count, snow canals, shifted public imagination from lush fantasy of Martian planetary abundance to the reality of rock and radiation, arguably paving cultural runway for the gritty realism of later space stories. Now finally, we had just odd Thanksgiving dates, the sequel. Now originally we had talked about the weird dates that eventually would become Thanksgiving, but between 1939 and 1941, states split over FDR's earlier date, creating essentially competing Thanksgivings in the same country. Now, retailers loved this split, school calendars and football schedules didn't. So eventually Congress would standardize the 4th Thursday in 1941, an example of how tradition is often just a policy setting wearing a fuzzy sweater. A quick micro note, outside the US, Thanksgiving-like observances float for pragmatic reasons, either harvest timing, trade rhythms, church calendars. The through line is less the day than the doing. Processions, food, performance, and yes, broadcasts that stitch personal ritual into a public rhythm. Now, I'm sure some of you in the last episode had thought, wow, if we have these amazing Enigma and coding machines, how do they truly reflect against the human beings? Well, the short comparison without the whiteboard is that human code versus machine crypto, those machine systems such as Enigma, TypeX, or SIGABA are fortresses that rely on keys and procedure and discipline. They scale incredibly well and produce gorgeous archives for historians. Now, their weakness is that people touch the keys. Bad key changes, repeated phrases, it becomes errors within the perfected system. And the fact that once you have enough traffic, math starts doing what math does. Human code talking refuses to fight on those terms. It hides meaning inside a living language, plus having a non-literal glossary gives you the ability to deny the enemy pre-math. There's no stable alphabet, no predictable frequencies, no cribbing languages, repeated phrases. Now, on the flip side is scope. Human nets are unbeatable on a tactical edge where seconds matter, but machines rule in the strategic volume sector where millions of groups and deception ops and archives are in the equation. Now, is that security through obscurity? Not really the brittle kind. It's obscurity plus structure. The structure is the two-layer design of the alphabet stream and word list, the change sheets, and the discipline about improvisation. The obscurity is the fluency outsiders don't have. Now, together, they make a defense that degrades gracefully. When a fragment fails in a speaking code talker language, operators can re-say or reframe or route around in just one breath. Now, machines degrade catastrophically. One wrong rotor and your net is locked. You don't know what the message truly says. Carry that forward and you get a modern lesson that expands from the main episode. Building communications with human fallbacks ensures that if the network is jammed or the battery dies in the rain, a pair of trained voices with a shared alphabet can still move a platoon. Now, it's not nostalgia for a time before machines, that's just ensuring that systems were designed from people who had to win before the progress bar finished. Now, I want to thank you for listening to this Naked History Debrief. For all the people who looked at the main episode description, the notices and the websites for those respective organizations are now on there. I had a little bit of a brain moment after uploading the episode, but they all should still be there. And I highly, highly, highly recommend visiting those resources and educating yourself if you don't know anything about it. Don't depend on me to be able to educate you fully. I'm just giving you the lens as to which to look over the world with. Now, if tonight's extras sharpened your ear, hit a follow, flip on that auto download, and feel free to drop a review. We love a 5 stars, and those won't get lost in the static. Now, next up on the main feed is going to be about Christmas, mainly about St. Nicholas himself. He went from Mira to Manhattan, how Santa Claus evolves in Dutch New York, and how Krampus, everyone's favorite Christmas do-badder, tries to crash the party. And we're going to look at a little bit more about how illustrators and advertisement companies wrap December in a wonderful capitalistic red. I can't wait to dive into it, and I hope everybody here has a wonderful Thanksgiving in the meantime. Feel free to sit down, chat with your family, talk to some that you've not talked with over the years, and maybe mention the podcast here or there. It might educate them on some things that they never knew about. So until then, I've been Dylan Gassaway, and this has been Naked History Debrief. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time to talk about a little bit of Santa Claus. Have a good one.